Okay, so you know how sometimes a deep dive is sparked by one of you listeners? Well, this is one of those times.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you sent over this document, and it's called, let me see, Myth and Facts.
This is the facts. Okay.
Right, and it's from the National MSc Medical Teachers Association. And it really got us thinking. It's all about, the role of teachers with MSc degrees in medical colleges in India. Like, what's their deal? Are they valued? What are the perceptions surrounding them? Especially compared to, like, teachers with MDs.
Gotcha. A comparison, huh?
Exactly. So we thought, let's do a deep dive into this document and try to sort out the facts from, well, the myths.
I'm in. Sound like there could be some juicy stuff in there.
Oh, there is. So, like, right off the bat, this document is making a pretty bold statement.
Lay it on me.
It's saying that these teachers, these non-medical MSc teachers, they're not just like filling some temporary gap, They're absolutely vital, essential to the whole medical education system in India.
Okay, I see where this is going, but I'm guessing it's not all sunshine and roses, right?
Not exactly. The document argues that despite their importance, they're constantly battling these misconceptions. And frankly, what they see is straight up unfair treatment compared to those with MDs.
Ah, so there's tension there. A bit of a power dynamic, maybe.
You got it. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack. We're going to go through each of these so-called myths and see how they stack up against the facts presented in the document. Like, what's the real story?
And let's get into it then. Myth number one, where are we starting?
All right, myth number one, it says MSc courses are for research, not teaching. Like, you get your Master of Science, you go do research, right?
Yeah, that's kind of the classic image, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lab coats, experiments, all that.
But here's the thing. The document immediately hits back and says, hold on, not so fast. The whole point of these specific MSc programs, like the ones in anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, subjects relevant to medicine, they were created precisely to make teachers for medical colleges.
So they're saying these MSc programs are more about pedagogy than, say, producing scientists.
Exactly. They're designed to solve a problem. And that problem is a lack of teachers, not necessarily to churn out researchers.
That's a really crucial distinction, because it reframes the whole purpose.
Right. So that myth busted right out of the gate.
Okay, what's next on the myth-busting agenda?
Myth number two. This one's about course structure and regulations. It claims MSc courses are unstructured and not regulated. So if that's true, that's kind of worrying, right? If you're a student or even just someone who cares about the quality of medical education.
It would definitely raise some red flags about the standards, wouldn't it?
Big time. But the document comes back swinging and says, nope, not even close. They argue that MSc and MD courses in those relevant subjects like preclinical, paraclinical stuff are actually super similar. Like, they follow basically the same curriculum.
Interesting. So they're saying it's not like these MSc programs are just making things up as they go along?
Not at all. And get this, they're often taught right alongside the MD courses, in the same departments, by the same faculty, even using the same textbooks and resources. Even the exams are pretty much identical.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot more alignment than I would have guessed, but there's got to be some differences, right?
You're right. There are some key differences, and the document points them out.
Hit me with those differences.
One is about competency-based education, that whole CBME thing. MD courses have kind of jumped on that bandwagon more recently, while MSc programs are, still working on fully integrating that approach.
It makes sense. CBME is still relatively new, and it takes time to adapt, especially in a complex field like medical education.
Totally. But here's the big difference that the document really highlights. There's no central regulatory body just for MSc courses.
Okay, that's a significant difference, unlike the, what is it now, the NMC, the National Medical Commission, that oversees the MD curriculum?
Exactly. So for MSc courses, it's kind of up to individual universities, their health university boards of studies, which, by the way, are made up entirely of doctors.
Interesting. So doctors are still heavily involved in shaping the MSc curriculum even without a central body. But does the document say anything about how these differences affect the overall value of an MSc qualification?
Yes, it does. And it's a crucial point for our listeners to understand. The document emphasizes that if you're an MBBS grad and you get a medical MSc, you're considered equivalent to an MD grad when it comes to teaching positions.
So even with those structural differences, the qualification itself holds up in terms of teaching eligibility.
Precisely. Which kind of throws a wrench in that whole MSc is inferior argument, doesn't it?
It definitely complicates things. All right, what's the next myth we're tackling?
Myth number 3 gets right to the heart of the difference in training. It says, persons with MSc qualifications have no clinical experience. Which, I mean, it's true. They're not doctors, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty obvious distinction, isn't it? You can't really argue with that.
Exactly. And the document doesn't try to. It acknowledges that, yep, MSc grads are not doctors. They don't have that clinical experience, and nobody's expecting them to.
But I'm guessing there's a but coming here.
Of course there is. The but is this. Their education still gives them a solid base in, like, the fundamentals of medical science. And get this. Clinical correlation is a huge part of their training.
So while they're not out there treating patients, they're learning how their science actually connects to real-life medical scenarios.
Exactly. It's all about making those connections, showing the relevance of the science to what doctors actually see in practice.
That makes a lot of sense, especially if their role is primarily teaching those foundational science subjects.
Okay, ready for myth number 4? This one's kind of harsh.
Hit me with it.
It says, persons with MSc qualifications have no teaching skills. Like, ouch, right. That's a direct attack on their professional abilities.
Yeah, that's a pretty bold statement, and potentially damaging if it's not true.
The document jumps right in to defend them and says, look, while formal teacher training is great, teaching is a skill that goes beyond degrees.
It's like some people are natural-born teachers, right? You either have that knack for it or you don't to some extent.
Exactly. And they point out that, you know, like any skill, teaching gets better with practice, with experience. So to say that just because you have a certain degree, you're automatically a good or bad teacher, well, it's just not true.
Right. Like, I bet there are amazing teachers out there who don't have a formal education degree, and I'm sure there are some folks with education degrees who are, well, not so great in the classroom.
100%. It's like saying that only people with culinary degrees can be good cooks. Sometimes natural talent and, you know, years of practice in the kitchen matter just as much.
Perfect analogy. So it's not about the piece of paper, it's about what you do with it. All right, what's myth number 5?
This one dives into the comparison of the degrees themselves. It says, MSc courses are not equivalent to MD courses, and the two shouldn't be treated as equal. Like, this is the core of the whole debate, right?
Yeah, this gets to the heart of it. So how does the document respond to this?
They say, in terms of like the academic rigor, the level of knowledge required, the content you cover, the two are basically comparable, especially in the relevant non-clinical subjects.
So they're saying, yeah, an MD is 3 years of postgraduate study, but the MSc covers the same stuff in its last 2 years. And that first year of the MSc is basically catching them up on, you know, basic human biology. So it all evens out.
Exactly. So the argument is, at the end of the day, they're both equipped with a similar level of knowledge in those specific areas. So why the disparity in treatment? That's the question they're posing.
Makes you think. Okay, on to the next myth then.
All right, myth number 6, and this one's pretty blunt. It says, a medical teacher is always better than a non-medical teacher. Like, period. End of story.
Wow. Okay, that's a strong opinion right there. No room for nuance, huh?
Not really.
Yeah.
But the document acknowledges that, yeah, medical teachers, they have more exposure to, like, the whole world of medicine, right?
Yeah.
They've been through MBBS, maybe even a clinical residency.
Sure, they have that real-world experience, that hands-on knowledge. But is that always necessary for teaching basic science?
That's exactly the point the document makes. They question whether that extensive clinical background is always the most important thing when you're teaching, say, anatomy or physiology.
I mean, it could be helpful for making connections, for illustrating concepts with real-life examples, but is it essential?
Right. And the document even points out that some MD grads who specialize in non-clinical areas, they might not have a ton of patient interaction after their initial MBBS. So their clinical experience might not be directly relevant to what they're teaching anyway.
Interesting. So it's not as clear-cut as just saying medical equals better teacher. It's more nuanced than that.
Way more nuanced. All right, ready for myth number 7.
Bring it on.
Here it is. Only a medical teacher can explain things better because of their training in multiple clinical subjects during MBBS.
So it's building on that last myth, leaning into the whole clinical experience thing.
Yeah, I can see how someone might think that. If you've seen all these things firsthand, you'd be able to explain them better, right?
That's the assumption. But the document kind of pushes back on that and says, remember, we're talking about teaching the fundamentals here, the basic medical sciences. It's not about managing patients directly.
It's like the skill of taking all those clinical findings and putting them together, making those complex diagnoses, that comes with specialization, with further training after MBBS.
Exactly. And they argue that non-medical folks, they're going through the same rigorous training just in their specific field. So they're developing those same skills, that ability to interpret and apply the knowledge just like an MD would in their area of expertise.
Okay, I see their point. It's about applying those analytical and interpretive skills within your specific domain. Right. And they even point out a difference in teaching styles. While MD programs might include some teaching, MSc programs often involve a lot of practical lab work, which requires a whole other set of teaching skills.
So it's not just about lecturing. It's about guiding students through experiments, teaching them practical lab techniques. That's a valuable skill set, too.
Totally. And the bottom line is, both types of teachers bring something important to the table. It's not a competition of who can explain things better.
All right, I'm ready for the next myth. What's number 8?
Okay, this one gets into the nitty-gritty of the MD program itself. It says, an MD postgraduate gets a better education than an MSc grad because only the top students, the ones who ace those crazy competitive exams, get into MD programs.
Ah, so it's all about the prestige, the exclusivity of getting into an MD program.
Exactly. But the document doesn't let this one slide. They point out that this whole obsession with super competitive entrance exams for MDs, it's actually a fairly recent thing. Back in the day, any MBBS grad could get into an MD program.
So the system wasn't always designed to weed out all but the absolute best.
Right. And get this, because of the lack of interest in some non-clinical specialties, they've actually had to lower the qualifying marks for some MD seats, even down to 0 percentile in some cases.
Wow, that's a pretty significant detail. It kind of throws a wrench in the whole only the best get in argument.
It does, right. And they argue that regardless of how selective the admissions are, that doesn't automatically mean the quality of the education is inherently better.
So it's not just about getting in, it's about what you learn and how you apply that knowledge once you're in the program.
Precisely. And they remind us that, in many cases, the same professors are teaching both MD and MSc students. And it's doctors who design the MSc syllabus and the exams.
So if the teachers, the curriculum, the evaluation methods are all largely the same, the logical conclusion is that the quality of education shouldn't be drastically different, right?
Exactly. Myth busted. Again. All right, what's next? Okay, myth number 9 focuses on the length of education. It states that medical teachers are more educated in terms of years spent studying than non-medical teachers. Seems like a pretty straightforward calculation, right?
Yeah, just add up the years in school, see who comes out ahead. So what's the verdict?
The document actually breaks it down for us. To become an assistant professor, a medical route typically looks like this. 5.5 years of MBBS, then 3 years of MD, and then usually another year senior residency. That's 9.5 years total.
Okay, so almost a decade of education and training. That's a long haul.
It is. But for a non-medical person going for the same position, it often looks more like this. 3 years for a BSc, 3 for an MSc, then another 3 to 5 for a PhD, and on top of that, another 3 years of, working as a tutor or similar experience.
So that's anywhere from 12 to 15 years total.
Yeah, so actually, non-medical teachers often end up spending more years in formal education. It's kind of a surprise, right?
It is. It challenges that assumption that doctors have automatically spent more time hitting the books.
Okay, ready for myth number 10. This one gets back to the core of what makes a good teacher.
Anyway, lay it on me.
It says, non-medical teachers just aren't capable of teaching medical students. Like they're just not cut out for it, period.
Wow, that's a pretty dismissive statement. It completely negates their skills and experience.
It does. But the document pushes back hard on this one. They say, look, good teaching, it's not about what degree you have. It's about individual ability, about having those natural skills and developing them over time.
Right. Some people are just born teachers, whether they're doctors, scientists, or anything else. And some people just aren't, no matter how many degrees they have.
Exactly. And the document actually suggests something really interesting. They say that non-medical teachers might, on average, be even more effective than medical teachers.
Oh, that's a bold claim. What's their reasoning for that?
They argue that because they're seen as outsiders in the medical world, they're under more scrutiny. They have to prove themselves more.
So they're constantly being evaluated, maybe held to a higher standard. It's like they have to go above and beyond to prove they belong.
Exactly. While medical teachers, they might just assume they're already competent because, well, they're doctors. It's like that old saying, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression.
That's a powerful way to put it. So the document's suggesting that this constant pressure to excel might actually make non-medical teachers more effective in the long run.
Precisely. And it brings up that whole idea of diversity being a strength. different perspectives, different approaches, they can all contribute to a richer learning environment.
Okay, I'm ready for the next myth. What's number 11?
So this one's pretty serious. It claims that MSc degrees and PhDs are just handed out like candy. They're fraudulently obtained. So basically they're saying these qualifications aren't worth the paper they're printed on.
Yikes, that's a huge accusation. It undermines the entire academic system, not just those specific degrees.
It does. And the document doesn't shy away from it. They acknowledge that, yeah, fake degrees exist. Unfortunately, it happens in every field. But to just blanketly say that all MSc degrees are fake, that's just not okay.
It's like saying all politicians are corrupt. Sure, there are some bad apples, but to paint everyone with the same brush is unfair and inaccurate.
Exactly. And they argue that if there's a case of a fake degree, it should be investigated and dealt with by the law. But you can't just tar everyone with the same brush based on a few bad actors.
It's about addressing specific instances of fraud, not making sweeping generalizations that damage the reputation of an entire field.
Right. It's about focusing on the individual case, not using it as an excuse to discredit an entire group of people.
All right, I'm curious about myth number 12. What's that one about?
It's another one that attacks their knowledge base. It claims that non-medical teachers just don't have enough knowledge, like they're not up to snuff.
Another blanket statement. So how does the document respond to this one?
They point out that if the MSc program is as rigorous as it's supposed to be, if it's on par with the MD program in those specific subjects, and if the exams are equally tough, then this whole argument falls apart.
It's like if the curriculum and the evaluation are similar, then the level of knowledge should also be similar, right?
Precisely. They argue that to say MSc teachers don't know enough reflects poorly on everyone involved in the MSc program, from the people designing the curriculum to the universities offering it.
It's like saying the entire system is flawed if the graduates aren't up to par.
Right. And they highlight the fact that MSc graduates often go on to win awards. They become successful teachers and researchers. Plus, they're often involved in teaching and even evaluating MD students.
So clearly, they have enough knowledge to be trusted with those responsibilities.
Okay, ready for myth number 13. This one's about their necessity.
Okay, what's the myth?
It states, we don't need non-medical teachers in medical education. There are plenty of medical teachers to go around.
With the huge number of medical colleges in India, I find that hard to believe.
And you'd be right. The document calls this out as a flat-out misconception. It says there's a massive shortage of medical teachers, especially in those non-clinical subjects.
So not enough doctors are choosing to specialize in those areas.
Exactly. The number of medical colleges has skyrocketed in recent years, but the number of people wanting to teach those subjects hasn't kept up. So there are tons of vacancies. Sometimes 30 to 50% of positions are unfilled.
Wow, that's a huge gap. So non-medical teachers are really stepping up to fill those roles.
They are, especially in colleges in more rural areas. The document even mentions this thing where some colleges just shuffle their medical faculty around to meet the minimum requirements for NMC recognition.
So it's like a temporary fix instead of addressing the root of the problem.
Exactly. They're literally moving people around like chess pieces instead of hiring qualified non-medical teachers who are ready and willing to teach.
It seems like a very inefficient system, and the government must be aware of this, right?
Oh, yeah. The document highlights that the government has officially recognized the crucial role of non-medical teachers in filling this gap.
So they're not just a temporary solution. They're a vital part of the system, especially in the long term.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to myth number 14.
Okay, let's hear it.
This one claims that hiring non-medical teachers was just a temporary fix and it's time to stop. Like their time is up, they've served their purpose.
I'm sensing a pattern here. A lot of these myths seem to be downplaying the importance of non-medical teachers.
You're picking up what we're putting down. And the document strongly disagrees with this one too. They point to recommendations from the MCI, both the Ethics Committee and the Board of Governors, who specifically advised against stopping the recruitment of non-medical teachers.
So even the MCI, which is primarily made up of doctors, saw the value in keeping non-medical teachers in the system.
They did. And the document argues that having a mix of backgrounds in the faculty is good for everyone. It brings fresh perspectives, prevents what they call academic inbreeding, and ultimately creates a more vibrant and stimulating learning environment for the students.
Makes sense. It's like any field, really. Diversity of thought, of experience, it leads to greater innovation and better outcomes overall.
All right, ready for myth number 15. This one's about the quality of education and training.
Okay, let's hear it.
It says, having non-medical teachers leads to a decline in the quality of teaching and ultimately affects how doctors are trained. So it's basically saying they're bad for the medical profession as a whole.
Wow, that's a pretty serious accusation. It has implications for patient care, for the future of healthcare in India.
It does, but the document provides a bunch of counter-arguments. They start by reminding us that, according to the NMC, a big part of medical education is self-directed learning.
So students aren't just passively absorbing information from teachers. They're expected to take initiative to research and learn independently.
Exactly. And they point out that in most departments, non-medical teachers are the minority. Most of the faculty are still medically qualified. So it doesn't really make sense to blame a small group for a decline in quality when the majority are doctors.
It's like blaming a few rusty screws for a whole bridge collapsing. There are likely bigger structural issues at play.
Exactly. Plus, they clarify that non-medical teachers mainly focus on the basic sciences in the first couple of years. The really crucial clinical training, the stuff that directly affects how doctors interact with patients, that all happens later, and it's all taught by doctors.
So their role is more about laying the foundation, providing that core scientific knowledge in the early years.
Exactly. Okay, ready for myth number 16.
I'm all ears.
This one questions their ability to assess students. It says non-medical teachers just can't assess medical students. Like they don't have the authority or the expertise to do it.
That seems a bit arbitrary. If they're qualified to teach, shouldn't they also be qualified to assess?
That's exactly what the document argues. They see this as a power play by some in the medical community to keep those assessment rules for themselves.
So it's more about protecting their own turf than about any real lack of competence on the part of non-medical teachers.
Right. They're basically saying if you can teach it, you can assess it. Denying them that opportunity is discriminatory and just doesn't make sense.
All right, let's see what myth number 17 has in store.
This one adds a specific condition for non-medical teachers to be examiners. It says only non-medical teachers with a PhD can assess students in exams. So it's like they're saying a PhD is the magic key to unlock assessment powers.
A PhD is great for research, but does it really make you a better judge of someone's understanding of basic medical science?
That's what the document questions. They point out that a PhD is primarily research-focused. It doesn't necessarily make you a better teacher or a better assessor of undergraduate knowledge.
So it seems like this requirement is more about limiting the involvement of non-medical teachers in the assessment process than about any genuine need for a PhD.
Exactly. It's like adding an extra hurdle just to make things more difficult.
All right, what's myth number 18 about?
This one's about leadership roles. It says, non-medical teachers just aren't capable of leading a department. So it's questioning their ability to be the head honcho.
Being a department head is a big responsibility. It involves managing people, budgets, all sorts of things. But does it require a medical degree?
That's what the document challenges. They argue that if someone has been working in a medical college department for, a decade or more, they've seen how it works, they understand the administrative side of things.
It's like any management role. You need organizational skills, leadership qualities, the ability to make decisions and delegate tasks effectively. A medical degree doesn't automatically give you those skills.
Precisely. And they point out that the head of department usually works in consultation with senior colleagues. So it's not like they're making all the decisions in a vacuum.
It's about collaboration, about leveraging the expertise of everyone on the team, whether they're medical or non-medical.
Exactly. Okay, ready for myth number 19. This one gets into the politics of it all.
Okay, let's hear it.
It claims that the NMC is an autonomous body, so the government shouldn't be interfering in its decisions. It's about that whole autonomy versus government control thing.
Yeah, that's a tricky balance. Regulatory bodies need to be independent, but there also needs to be some accountability.
Right. And the document clarifies that, yes, the NMC has autonomy in setting policies for medical education.
Yeah.
But there's a catch. The NMC Act itself states that the government has the final say, even on things like appointing non-medical teachers.
So the government ultimately has the power to overrule the NMC if it sees fit.
They do. And the document actually compares the NMC, which is heavily dominated by doctors, to organizations like the UK's NHS, which has a much more diverse leadership structure.
Interesting. They're implying that the NMC might be more focused on protecting the interests of doctors than on serving the broader needs of the medical education system.
That's the suggestion. They argue that the government, because it's accountable to the public, is actually more likely to make decisions that benefit everyone, not just one particular group.
It's about finding that balance between professional autonomy and the public good. All right, what's myth number 20?
This one's about how the regulations have changed over time. It states, the NMC originally stuck with the old faculty ratios in its draft guidelines, but then they caved to public pressure and changed them.
Public pressure. I wonder who was applying that pressure.
The document doesn't leave much room for doubt. They say that the medical community, because it's so much larger than the non-medical teaching community, basically used their numbers to lobby for the changes they wanted.
So it wasn't really about what was best for medical education. It was about protecting the interests of the dominant group.
That's the argument. They call it an abuse of power, not a genuine response to public demand.
Okay, I'm ready for myth number 21. What's that one about?
This one tries to link changes in the curriculum to the perceived incompetence of non-medical teachers. It says non-medical teachers were fine when the curriculum was all separate subjects, but now that it's competency-based and integrated, they're just not up to the task.
So they're saying that CBME, this new way of teaching, requires skills that non-medical teachers don't have.
That's the claim. But the document points out that CBME is new for everyone, for both medical and non-medical teachers. Everyone's supposed to be getting training on how to implement it effectively.
So it's not like non-medical teachers are inherently incapable of adapting to this new approach.
Exactly. And they actually make a pretty serious allegation. They claim that some medical colleges are deliberately not giving their non-medical teachers the training they need on CBME.
Wow, so they're being set up to fail, essentially.
That's the implication. The document also clarifies that while integration is a big part of CBME, it's only about 30% of the syllabus. And non-medical teachers are already experts in those core basic science subjects that are taught in the first year. So integrating their teaching into the broader curriculum shouldn't be that difficult.
It's about collaboration, about working together to ensure that the curriculum flows seamlessly, regardless of who's teaching what.
Right. They also point out that vertical integration, connecting basic science with clinical applications, has always been part of the MSc curriculum.
So they're already used to making those connections between theory and practice.
Exactly. And they emphasize that they're familiar with medical terminology, they understand the language of medicine.
So they're not coming in completely blind, they have the foundation to build on.
Okay, 2 more myths to go. Ready for number 22?
Bring it on.
This one gets back to the perceived value of different degrees. It says, look, doctors, our graduate degree is an MBBS. Non-medical teachers have BScs in botany, zoology, chemistry, or even BDS. They're just not qualified to teach medical students.
So it's back to that hierarchy of degrees, implying that an MBBS is inherently superior.
Exactly. But the document pushes back and says, while an MBBS is great for doctors, it doesn't automatically mean that someone with a different degree can't teach medical students.
It's about having the relevant knowledge and the teaching skills, regardless of your initial undergraduate degree.
Right. And they remind us that the Medical M.Sc program specifically prepares them to teach those core medical sciences. They even spend their first year covering the same basic science as the first year of MBBS.
So they have that foundational knowledge. They're not coming into it completely unprepared.
Okay, last one. Myth number 23. This one makes a direct link between non-medical teachers and, well, bad doctors.
Okay, that sounds serious. Let's hear it.
It claims that teaching by non-medical educators leads to poor quality instruction, which ultimately means poorly trained doctors, and that negatively impacts patient health. So they're basically saying that non-medical teachers are putting patients at risk.
Wow, that's a heavy accusation. It's a big leap to go from teaching basic science to harming patients.
It is, and the document strongly rejects this claim. They point out that non-medical teachers mainly focus on those preclinical basic science subjects, the actual clinical training, the hands-on stuff that directly affects patient care. That's all done by doctors.
So they're not responsible for training doctors on how to diagnose and treat patients.
Exactly. And they argue that blaming non-medical teachers for poor patient outcomes is a distraction from the real problems in medical education. They list a whole bunch of issues, like a general lack of faculty, not enough opportunities for students to interact with patients, poor infrastructure in some colleges, corruption in exams, and even fudging data to meet requirements.
So it's like they're being used as scapegoats when there are much bigger systemic issues at play.
Right. They even sent a report that says almost 80% of Indian medical colleges don't meet the minimum standards. So there are clearly deeper issues that need to be addressed.
It's like blaming a few cracks in the sidewalk for traffic accidents. There's a whole lot more going on that needs to be fixed.